I think it's fair to say that expectations were quite high and intense for this new version of Fantastic Four. That, these are superheroes who've been around for a long, long time, whose previous introductions to the cinematic world have not always been received and celebrated with fanfare. And so I'm curious about your own experiences with this team throughout your life before this.
Well, it's funny because as a little kid, I was introduced to Spider-Man and Fantastic Four by another kid in like the first grade who was smuggling in comics. So I developed this early love of the material. And, I definitely like appreciated something about the previous movies, but I felt like it was time to do something different with it. And when I was brought into the team, they were already in progress on this 60s version, this sort of optimistic space race era version, which brought me back to like the sensibility of like the early comics. So I was excited for that.
Obviously, this takes place in a different world than most of the other Marvel stuff, but is there any sort of pressure or need to tie things in, or at least know that they will eventually be tied into the look of the rest of the world, or is that just too expansive and it has to sort of be its own thing?
Well, I think, Kevin at Marvel keeps a pretty good eye at that on that, and he's got this concept artist Ryan Meinerding who like does these amazing concept pieces. So there was this guide of keeping it within within the lane, but we had a lot of wiggle room within that lane. So it was kind of fun to just experiment with like how can we keep it like unique to this movie, but still it's got to be a classic Marvel look.
And did you have any reference point of the previous films? And if you didn't, did you want to make sure that you continued not to?
Well, I think it's like the biggest thing we studied was read because stretching is incredibly hard to look realistic and looked at some of the things they tried to do with muscles and some of the things they did with costumes and said, let's take the best of what we did. Let's go back to the comic books for framing. Let's go to the Alex Ross comics for like he did like great things like breaking the frame with different parts, which really like allow like and using perspective and depth, which allows you to like get around some of the challenges and some of the compositional challenges. Um, so I feel like he was the one we did the most deep dive into the other previous Fantastic Four movies. But I will say too, Torch, um, he's kind of got this classic look, and we wanted to keep it grounded in real physics, of course, which I'm sure they tried to do on the other movies. So we did a lot of fire reference and fire shooting, but it's interesting because fundamentally it does have to be a human being under fire who's emitting fire. So it's like we couldn't deviate too far from the previous movie. So Torch probably was the one that had the most callback to previous movies.
Talk to me about the Silver Surfer.
Silver Surfer, what was interesting is we talked to people who had worked on the rise of the Silver Surfer, and the thing they told us is it seems easy, like Chrome Chrome is like CG 101, right? Everybody does like a Chrome ball or Chrome logo, and it's like voila. But what we had heard is like it's really because it's an animated character and different environments. The minute like an expression changes or a move changes, everything changes, and it looks maybe not what you want, or it changes so fast it's distracting. So we went in knowing that that was a challenge, and we came up with some techniques to try to hit that challenge coming out of the gate.
Galactic also is so, big in scope, but needs to look both realistic, I think, and also like something you couldn't possibly imagine being real, if that's a good way to put it.
For sure. And I think Galactus is a fan favorite. People have been dying to see Galactus, and we had great concept artwork, which translated into a great real costume. So part of what I came in and worked with Matt Shackman, the director, on is like, can we? come at a 60 sensibility for like the effects as a first pass. What would we do? Let's shoot a miniature for the Excelsior. What would they do in the 60s with this? Well, they probably would shoot a guy in a suit, you know, and maybe optically composite him in and see how that worked. And I mean, we knew that wouldn't hold up, but we wanted to get ideas from it because just the scale wouldn't quite work. There's a little bit of a giveaway with a guy in a costume. So, but what we did is we did shoot I think just about every scene with him in camera in a costume with a lens placed like where it might be on the ground or in New York. And we tried to like work with the cinematographer, work with the costume people, and just like get something that like got us in the zone. And then on top of that, ILM did a great job of just adding detail and detail and detail and fine tuning everything and helping helping with scale, like helping slow down his motion. Because I think that's a giveaway too, is like once you scale somebody up really, really big, they're massive and they can't move fast. So that was part of our fun.
I think fine tuning is key to this film's entire experience because, there's a lot of it that if you weren't paying attention, you might be like, this is our world. And then you just stop for 1 second. You're like, wait a minute. It's a flying car, but it's not really flying. It's sort of just, and I like all that specificity. I'm curious about your approach there and what was maybe subtly difficult that we wouldn't have expected.
Well, there was an attention to detail, as you said. I think part of it is, you know, part of the filmmaking process is pre-production shooting and post-production. And in post-production, a lot of times the team that you've built in pre-production and in filming, they're long gone. They're on their next project. We had the benefit of our production designer, Kasra, like was there on call available, coming in, reviewing stuff, and our cinematographer was too. So perfect example would be there's a big shot that was actually in the trailer of Galactus's Foot in New York, and it's all a virtual New York. And so what we did, we had ILM actually worked on that shot too, and they did a lighting study, and we sent that to the cinematographer, and he came back and he gave us notes and he gave us a pick. In the same shot, we have set dressing and billboards and signage, and we talk with Kasra and we say, what would be appropriate here? And so we're actually sort of set designing in post in the same way we would have in pre-production or filming. And I feel like that through line of like every period billboard had like artistic eyes on it from start to finish.
Tell me more about this virtual New York. That sounds interesting enough. I would watch that movie, without a plot.
So uh I worked on some Spider-Man movies, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies early in my career. And since then, a lot of companies have done a lot of big building work. ILM has done crazy building work in New York. ImageWorks has the Spider-Man stuff, and they have building forward from that. We actually took both of their libraries from New York, merged them together, and then built on top of that. And the trick was any building that's built past the 1960s is no good in our world. It's stylistically, it's not retro future modern. It's more, the aesthetic of different school of architecture. So we would we'd have a CG version of everything. We'd have a bunch of CG buildings. We worked with Casseron, retro future, kind of almost Jetsons, like space age, sleek. Um, and we built this library, and then we actually tried to shoot footage. So we shot footage in New York, but what would happen, we'd shoot something, and you can kind of see it in the big Galactus shadow over New York, where took the whole city and any building in there that looks like it was built post 1960s replaced. And then on top of it, like we put in all these like cool architectural like skyline things and we're basically art directing the whole frame. So that was kind of like from the top down, from real New York down. That's how we did it. From the bottom up, production built an entire Times Square. So it was I would say like 75% scale. It wasn't full-time square, but the way they did it, they reduced it was to take out lanes and not, I mean, not just scale everything down. Still had to be human scale. So a massive set in Pinewood Studios in London. And, but lots of gaps that VFX had to fill out, including a billboard was halfway up and we would extend that. And we'd add other billboards above. And it was just filled with like TVs that were playing, vintage looking TVs that were playing vintage period appropriate commercials on a loop. And we actually tried to get real, some real 60s commercials to put in there. And we're partnered with General Mills. And so we had a bunch of like cereals and we did like, we had created our own period feeling commercials that we ran on top of the building. So, and then just from there, it's extending out, extending out, extending out. So you go off the set and you tilt up or you fly up and it's in the VFX world. And we tried to make that transition seamless.
It's all very impressive. And obviously, the goal of any good blockbuster that's going to do well is there's going to be a sequel to be more. But the sequel here isn't really a sequel, and it's going to be not in this, this world. So, how did that go into your approach to know that you're building something that these characters will be used more, but they probably won't be in this world very much?
Well, we as we're going along, of course, Kevin has got the big picture of the whole Marvel universe. So he was very involved and very in like every decision about every character. It's like he cares deeply about them in such a beautiful way, and he's got the game plan going forward. Aside from that, we would discuss with the visual effects teams on the next project. So we'd have a show and tell with them and say, we're doing this, trying this, and they're like, are you trying this? Like, I think we're gonna try this in the next movie. So okay. We kind of like divvied up like you can do this, you can do this, and mostly just making sure that we were doing work that would carry on into future Marvel movies.
Do you have any intention of being involved in future Marvel movies?
At this point, who knows? I'm taking some time off now, but it was a really fun experience. So I don't know. It's the thing about the Marvel universe is like it's just full of surprises and you never know what's coming. So I'm kind of open at this point.
Well, what work of some of your colleagues are you admiring this year? What film has some really incredible visual effects?
I mean, I don't think we can have a visual effects conversation this year without Avatar. I saw a screening of that, and I mean, it's mind-blowingly good in terms of what they're doing. And we worked with Weta on Fantastic Four. They did some of the apes and stuff, and it's like I have huge respect for that team. And I there's so much good work this year, but it's like I see the Avatar work, and I'm like, wow, they like poured their hearts into this, and in the same way we poured our hearts into it. But it's like, you know, I like that. I like there's a lot of little pieces and little movies that I'm seeing that I'm still catching up on everything, but like I love like combination of nuanced and visible work on little stuff or stuff that's integrating in like the Lost Bus did like great fire stuff outside windows and just like helped with storytelling. And so that's one kind of visual effects, and then you've got the massive, massive stuff that we're doing. So I think there's a world for all of it.
Well, thank you so much, Scott. This was a real pleasure, and looking forward to after your break, seeing what's next for you.
Excellent. Thank you.